Kildare Youth Theatre is about 15 years old, and we do a range of productions from classical to modern and contemporary to devised and site-specific. Each year we do a classical play. Last year we did Macbeth, and this year we were grateful to receive Arts Council funding, and we staged a production of Romeo and Juliet. The young people with whom we work are school-going, so they have either studied it or perhaps they are currently studying the play that they're actually staging. So we do a full version of it, a full play, without any edits or cuts, and it's a good and challenging task, and quite an arduous one, because we have to start in October with maybe once a week rehearsals, sometimes twice, and it comes to the stage around about March or May, there between that time.
He live in triumph and Mercutio slain. Away to heaven, respectful lenity.
Yeah. And that's like I'm not holding anyone back now. Let that go to heaven, respectful and lenity. Being, you know.
The law that the prince had made.
Yeah, but also being lenient is, kind of going easy on someone. To be lenient with someone, So lenity or lenity either is fine. So you can say way to heaven. So bounce off Jerry, he'll give you energy to fuel off.
He live in triumph and Mercutio slain. Away to heaven, respectful lenity.
I'll say yon grey is not the morning's eye. It's fluently like that. 'Tis but the pale reflex of Cynthia's bow. You can slow it down in some of those. Bow, or brow, it is her brow in this one. What's it in yours?
Oh, brow it is too.
Brow, of her brow. Nor that, and he's pointing, nor that is not the lark, little comma, whose notes do beat the vaulty heaven so high above our heads. I have more care to stay than will to go. You really are using the diaphragm and pulling the controlling your breath with it, but not bulleting out. Relax, and see what you can do with it. We chose Romeo and Juliet for a number of reasons. One obvious one was because it's on the junior cert curriculum, and we were interested in staging texts that are in the school curriculum. And the other reason is because it's a play that speaks very, very strongly to young people. Obviously, I suppose that's the reason why it's on the junior cert. But for example, a traditional reading of Romeo and Juliet, or maybe a standard one, would seem to imply that the play is about love, and that it's a tragic love story, and that there is, a fairly straightforward character there, Romeo, and another one in Juliet. But of course, like any of Shakespeare's great tragedies, is far more complex than that. So the complexity is what drew us to it, particularly around the discussion about love and the nature of love. For us, the major way of understanding it is to, one, look at the characters and how they change, but also look at the imagery that Shakespeare uses. And so we track, for example, the imagery of light and dark, which every, I think, junior cert student knows is one of the major images of Romeo and Juliet. And we find that Romeo describes himself, and is described by others in the first part of the play, as being in darkness, in a way, grounded very much of the earth. First seen walking under a grove of trees. He's melancholy, he's depressed, we figure. There are lines to suggest that he is a typical, perhaps spoilt, wealthy, young nobleman with very little to do, labouring under a sort of melancholia or a depression. His father calls him a heavy son, and Mercutio talks about him appearing in the likeness of a sigh, and a number of other indications. Benvolio speaks about him as well as such, and he himself talks about his own depression.
What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours?
Not having that which having makes them short.
In love?
Out.
Of love?
Out of her favour, where I am in love.
Alas, that love so gentle in his view should be so tyrannous and rough in proof.
Alas, that love whose view is muffled still shall without eyes see pathways to his will. Here's much to do with hate, but more with love. Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first create? Griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief to too much of mine own. I have lost myself. I am not here. This is not Romeo, he is some other where.
This is coloured very much as a sort of a burden. He describes it as love. Love is a burden, and under such a burden he is borne down. And when Mercutio says, leap up, light, become airy, like love is something of the air, like Cupid with wings, Romeo sees it very much as grounded in the mud, deep down, buried, something that holds him down.
Give me delight. I am not for dissembling. Being but heavy, I will bear delight.
Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance.
Not I, believe me, you have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground, I cannot move.
You are a lover. Borrow Cupid's wings and with them soar above the common bounds.
I am too sore impierced with his shaft to soar with his light feathers. And so bound, I cannot bound a pitch above dull wool. Under love's heavy burden do I sink.
And it isn't until he meets Juliet at the Capulet ball, but more importantly when he speaks to her after in the balcony scene, in the famous balcony scene, in that speech alone he describes her in countless references to light, the exact opposite to what he is or how he sees himself, that she is this light being, ethereal of the stars, maybe like the sun, bright-cheeked, everything he can think of he describes her as light, and he associates her with light. And even when he starts to talk to her, he can see himself describing himself differently when she says, "How did you come here?"
With love's light wings that I o'erperch these walls. For stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do that theirs love attempt. Therefore, thy kinsmen are no let to me.
So he sees himself rising up out of the ground eventually and becoming something more light-hearted. And after his love scene with her, where they make love and he is banished, he is still nourished by the thoughts of the lightness that comes to him when he thinks of Juliet.
If I may trust the flattering truth of sleep, my dreams presage some joyful news at hand. My bosom's lord sits lightly in his throne, and all this day and all the customed spirit lifts me high above the ground with cheerful thoughts. I dreamt my lady came and found me dead. Strange dream that gives a dead man leave to think. And breathed such life with kisses in my lips that I revived and was an emperor.
It's the first time we get him speaking about being of something else, not the earth, of something airy in those airy regions. And when Juliet dies and he sees her dead, he speaks again of how her brightness illuminates this dark tomb into something much more heavenly and a lanthorn, and speaks of lightning before death. So we all know that tracking that journey through the imagery of light and dark makes for a significant understanding of the play, because it does lead us to think about him as somebody who's a young person who's very depressed and who finds relief, even if it's instantaneous and immediate, in the love that he sees with Juliet, whom he misinterprets, and she misinterprets him. She is no more light than he is. She is bound and tied into this family, into this wedding, and has very little freedom. Everything she does is done in secret, and she must be very practical about what she does. But she sees him too as a bright angel, as something, again, the opposite of what she is. So after he encounters her and has this spark or explosive, violent delight that the friar speaks about, when she dies, for him, it's not so much, I think, joining with her after death. It's the thought of having to go back to that melancholy that is too hard, that's too difficult for him, that his immediate decision is to kill himself. He thinks not about it at all after Balthazar tells him that Juliet has died. He says, well, Juliet, I will lie with thee tonight. That's it. It's a simple, and now for means. I'm going to find out how to do it.
Juliet! I'll lie with thee tonight. Let's see for means.
He's never returning to that dark place. And we see a lot of that with young people, particularly with teenagers, whose emotions are very much to the front. They live in the emotion. So when he is in love, he is fully in love and he doesn't think about anybody else very much. The friar talks about this. Young men's love lies not in their hearts but in their eyes. He might as well have said it's in their words and what they say, because Romeo in the first half is all words, all the talk about love, and it comes easy to him to speak about love. But when he has to do something about love, it's harder, and that's when it becomes very serious, when he has to act on it. He finds out how to do that, and he does it, and then it's taken away from him. So he doesn't get this chance to grow up. We know that teenagers and young people in general go through this phase of being in love, being so self-obsessed while in love, concerned about themselves, only interested in the other person that they're in love with, and not being able to think about anything else. And eventually moving from that verbal kind of I love you and I can't live without you verbal stage into the act of doing kind things for people, doing stuff for the one that you love, acting out of love, moving from there into that kind of turning love into almost work is the sign of maturity. Romeo doesn't get a chance to do that. His life is cut off before that. Neither does Juliet. She's far more practical. For her, love is a contract that needs to be bound. She's testing this young man out to see will he take her out of here, but she does love him, and she misreads him as well as somebody that is capable of saving her. I think he can just about save himself, if he can even do that. It's questionable.
Come night, come Romeo. Come thou day in night, for thou wilt lie upon the wings of night, whiter than new snow upon a raven's back. Oh, come gentle night, come loving black-browed night, give me my Romeo.
The final thought on light is when they reach the moment of happiness that they've both been looking for when they're together. It's set in dawn, and when it's neither light nor dark. And Shakespeare is wonderful about his ambiguities. Nothing in Shakespeare usually is either black or white. A character is neither good nor bad. Here, like the friar says, in everything good there's something bad, and in everything bad there is the potential for it to grow into something good. Nothing is what it seems on first glance. So here in this grey area of neither light nor dark, they meet, they come together, they make love, and this is the time when, I suppose, reality strikes. You know, they're not seeing each other as bright things or dark things or having to deal with their own darkness. They just see what it is. Now it's at the end, we have to leave and I must go. And that's what happens. It's a very practical scene. The nurse is part of it. She comes in and lets them out and tells them that the mother is coming. And Juliet, being practical, prepares herself for that and knows what she has to do. She can't trust anyone around her. She asks for advice to everyone, to her mother, to the nurse, and she goes to the friar in the end and gets the vial of poison, or the drug that will help her sleep for 2 days.
Take thou this vial, being then in bed, and this distilled liquor drink thou off, And presently through all thy veins shall run a cold and drowsy humour. For no pulse shall keep his native progress but surcease. No warmth, no breath shall testify thou liv'st.
The question of fate and destiny in the play is an interesting one. They are supposed to be star-crossed lovers, but we didn't really follow that thread too closely. It's not as interesting as the psychological one, at least not to us as a youth theatre. The processes of being in love are far more interesting, and the types of love one goes through. Still, it is there, but one wonders whether the characters are really shaping their own destiny. Yes, there are many coincidences and many chances and many things that could have changed with the slightest time shift or a word spoken here or a letter that doesn't go missing. They may have changed elements. Romeo says before he goes into the Capulet ball, my mind misgives some consequence, yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night revels. And you wonder whether it's a sort of a death wish or whether he really does feel some force that is directing his actions. We chose to feel that, you know, like many depressed young people, he dramatizes his situation. He doesn't choose to acknowledge it as his own action, and he puts the responsibility for how he feels on another destiny, on another force like destiny or fate. And it's a classic kind of over dramatization of his feeling. It's an interesting one though, and they in the prologue they speak of the star-crossed lovers, that they are destined to be this way. They are, I would argue, destined to be this way, but by their society and by their own own understandings of themselves, not necessarily by universal force, maybe by love. As a powerful feeling that they have, and they both react to it differently. They would appear to have no other choice but to do what they do because they feel this way.
Love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged a fire sparkling in lovers' eyes, being vexed a sea nourished with lovers' tears. What is it else? It is a madness most discreet, a choking gall and a preserving sweet. It is too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorn.
Do thou but close our hands with holy words, then love-devouring death do what he dare. It is enough I may call her mine. Let me be tamed. Let me be put to death. I am content so thou wilt have it. I'll say, yon grey is not the morning's eye, 'tis but the pale reflex of Cynthia's brow, nor that it is not the lark whose notes do beat the vaulty heavens so high above our heads. I have more care to stay than will to go. Come death, and welcome Juliet Wilson, so. How is my soul? Let's talk, it is not that.
The style that we chose for this one, it evolved because we're a youth theatre and have no great funding or resources. So we thought, we'll do a bare bones staging of it as they would have done in the King's Men, with the King's Men in Shakespeare's Globe. So that led to some interesting research and lots of discussion with the young people about the idea of performing text or performing lines directly to the audience, speaking directly to them, breaking the fourth wall, bringing them very much on the journey with you. So, for instance, when Romeo is coming into the garden and into the balcony, and he's saying, "But soft, what light from yonder window break," he's trying to convince the audience that it is Juliet, that she is the sun, and that she is brighter than anything. He's talking directly to us. Will I speak to her now? Will I hold my voice back? Or it's me she's talking about. It's very much to us. All of the monologues we looked at that way, that really engaged the audience. The friar talking to us like as if it was a sermon he was giving, and instructing people in the front row about this flower and that flower. And it's a slight leap to make for actors to move from the acknowledgement of people watching you and going with you on this journey. From that position to being on your own suffering, if they're there while you're looking at a window and going to see Juliet, why aren't they there when you're killing yourself? But they are, and he does talk to us there too. I think that's what's very, very interesting. The way that I used it most was when the nurse and Lady Capulet discover Juliet's dead body. When they're calling for help, we have them call to the audience, shout to the audience directly for help, begging them to come and do something about this beloved daughter of theirs. Commedia dell'arte, and particularly Annie Ryan's version of Commedia dell'arte, what I call cartoon commedia, is about channeling the energy straight at the audience, speaking directly to them rather than to the characters on stage, and that I understand, and I think Shakespeare is the master at that, and those speeches that characters have are directly to the audience, picking people and speaking directly to them. The other was just the use of projections. We had somebody design them that would symbolize more the mood of the scene rather than the specific place. But they are subtle, like a bird in a cage for Juliet's bedroom, a heart with a glass bullet through it for the tomb, little things like that. So the style was very much about the acting and using all the spaces. We also had a microphone over the stage for the last scene in the tomb and turned it on and set it on reverb so that there would be an echoing sound throughout the auditorium when characters came into the same space, the same stage, but now it was significantly different, and that I think was very effective.
Till I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous and that the lean abhorred monster keeps thee here in the dark to be his paramour. For fear of that, I will still stay with thee. Rome! Oh, pale and steeped in blood. What an unkind hour is guilty of this lamentable chance.
So stylistically, there were a number of very simple devices that we used, but none more so than the actors really committing to the characters, learning the lines, living the speeches, getting the truth as far as possible, and performing it bare, with just a wide space, no special effects. We also staged it in a church locally in the Protestant church in Newbridge. Which was really interesting because there was a balcony, and on a flat stage such as the Moat, we had to trick the audience a bit in using the stage as a flat space where Juliet was behind looking down and he was in front looking up. Romeo is facing the audience, crawling along the ground. She's standing, confined to a certain area. It's how they react and behave to each other that you get a sense of two completely different spaces that they're in. In the church, that was not a problem. And it was very simply, Juliet was in the organ balcony and Romeo was in the aisles talking up to her. And using the supports of the balcony and various pews, and I think it lent him an extra air of playfulness to be able to swing from pews as well. But the charge and the intensity was also there in the flat ground production, So I think if you're staging scenes, and definitely they're so easy to stage, you need nothing at all except committed actors and a bare space, not even levels in the space. And using imagination to convince the audience that where they're watching is what you want it to be, because that's after all how Shakespeare did it. It was a simple bare stage.
A glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show its head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned, and some punish it. For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.